Hi, welcome to episode 9 of Lean Coffee Talk. I'm Mark Graban, joined as always by...
Jamie Flinchbaugh. Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, good to see you, Jamie. We're going to talk coffee. We're going to talk robotics in the auto industry. We're going to talk about quality and a number of things here today. Jamie is famously the soccer fan of the two of us. Might surprise you. I watched some World Cup. I'm sure you have more World Cup reactions and highlights from your perspective.
Yeah, we could talk for the whole episode, I'm sure, but
Let's not. No.
let's not. And yeah, I watched a lot of matches. It was fortunate. I always love if I either have a vacation or take a vacation during the group stage, and I can watch a lot of matches when they're on. And there's certainly some great storylines with the smaller teams like Cape Verde in particular. But I would say, you're coupled with while Spain wasn't favored, you had the top 4 rated teams in the world in the semifinals.
Mm-hmm.
No underdogs, and while France has a lot of star power, Spain was just dominant the entire World Cup. And Rodri, player of the tournament, ultimately very extremely good performance all the way through. So I think the right team won in the end. But at the same time, the tournament was marred with, decisions all the way leading up to it by FIFA. Plenty of execution problems. I think everybody that really wanted to go looked past them, but plenty of execution problems. Plenty of inconsistent application of the rules, and then coming out of the World Cup, they talk about expanding it to 64 countries and selling a stake to private equity into the World Cup, which has very instantly created massive uproar.
Yeah,
because you can't sell soccer, like it's pretty much the case. So. And one of the, we've had multiple corrupt leaders running FIFA for a long time, and this guy runs on a post again. So yeah, there's plenty to complain about. Lots of good storylines. Very fair outcome in the end. And then we get the Women's World Cup next year.
Yeah, the final. I watched the final, and think about like process metrics, and results metrics. I mean, the score was 1-0 Spain, but the shots on goal were 20-0. Like it was dominant more. And as a not even casual soccer viewer, I could tell like Spain was dominating the game, but it was scoreless.
Yep. And they, to be fair, and this is part of Argentina's game, they have fight, and their keeper did fantastic, and they pushed and crowded and, just created as little space for Spain as possible. But they spent so much time on their heels, they really never got on the front foot of attack. They could have used some real breakaway, long ball, stretch things out a bit, but they just never had it. So yeah, Spain was the dominant team, but Argentina showed their grit just to last as long as they did. And of course, a pretty dumb, second yellow. Well, really both yellows were on Fernandez's part were dumb, but he got fairly sent off. That hurt the quality of the match, but it just demonstrated more opportunities to show some grit with Argentina. And people complain about them being dirty, but most of it was just some hard fouls, and they got called for them, and sometimes they got sent off the field. So it's rough. I don't know if dirty is the right word.
Rough, yeah. Golden Glove award. And this is the best goaltender in the World Cup. I noticed they awarded that to the Spain goaltender, and they gave up what, one goal in how many matches? Was it 7 or 8? But
Yeah, 8, I
but
think. Yeah.
as a team, they gave up one goal. So the Argentina goaltender was being bombarded, and he set a record for the most saves in a World Cup match. And I'm like, well, did the Spanish was the Spanish goaltender great, or was the team and their defense and their ball control? I mean, is it sort of kind of unfair? Was it a statistical thing, or is it a judgment call? Do you know?
It's I mean, the statistics, when you have, when you gave up one goal, it's hard to kind of go, yeah, there you go, right? And Mbappe, had the most goals, but the third place scrimmage match, which shouldn't even exist, counted.
Right.
And so and it shouldn't count. It shouldn't even exist, let alone count. So, but he gets to, get that award. So, yeah, I think, it's for the body of work across the entire tournament. And I think it was both. I think he was great. He was solid when he needed to be. He made some very big saves in important matches. And the defense was great in front of him. So, it's kind of like, running back with lots of yardage supporting their offensive line. The running back still gets the accolades, but they know that to thank the offensive line for their contributions to that. I think this is kind of the same thing. I don't have a complaint of that, but and Emmy Martinez won it last time, but I think, pretty sure. But either way, he was he had a great match and a good tournament, but a great match.
Yeah. One other observation I want to get your thoughts on. Low scoring game there. 1-0, and some of the other matches I watched. I'm the casual American sports fan who likes I'd rather see goals if I'm watching hockey, like a 5-3 game to me, depending on the context. If it's not a meaningful playoff game, might be more fun to watch than a 1-0 playoffs or something. Different situation. The tension and the drama. And World Cup, these matches at the end are playoffs basically. But the point I was getting to is that my joking observation about soccer is like there's so much that goes into trying to find a reason to wave off almost any goal that's scored. Because like Spain scored, in my mind, they scored 3 and they had 2 called off, one because of a foul and one because like somebody's shoulder. I think I finally understand it, soccer offsides now. But like such minuscule, like there was one match where like somebody was offside by a toe. Right. Yep. And part of me is like, let them play, let them score. I'd rather watch that.
Yeah. And the offsides is tricky because there's a lot of talk of how much offside is offside. But if you say there's a concept called the daylight rule, which is, there should be daylight between 2 players for them to be offside, which would give an advantage to the attacker, but it'll still come down to millimeters, right? And if you have if you can see it in millimeters, offside is offside. And it's like, well, what if you give them, and this happened in the Premier League, what if you give them a 3 centimeter window? Well, then 3.5 centimeters, is offside, and it still comes down to the finest of margins. And everybody will say, well, just ignore that technology. But then we go back to some, missed calls where goals were allowed that really shouldn't have been, wildly missed offsides, narrowly missed offsides. And you're like, yeah, but that goal shouldn't have stood. So then we're going to complain about that. And so it's kind of like, well, just figure out where you want to have it. And the technology helps you. And it is what it is. But, in baseball, you can enjoy a 1-0 game where somebody throws a no-hitter, right?
Sure.
And I mean, a lot of it is the battle. A lot of it is the play in between, and not just the goals. Um, and finals are often cagey,
Sure.
stiff and tight, because it's
Yeah.
one game, and you don't have another shot for 4 years, and half the players won't even be there. So
Yeah.
it's just like a Super Bowl, teams come in and you're like, they don't look like their regular selves.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
look like they're trying not to lose, and that's pretty common for most World Cup finals. Not all, but most. Is boy, there's a lot of pressure not to lose. So
Yeah.
I that's why I love the group stages, and I like the semifinals more than the final. Of course, I want to watch the final. It's the final,
Mhm.
but it's almost just about who's going to take it home. I'm not expecting the best match.
The thing about the offside rule, and like when it's human, the human eye isn't going to so precisely see the millimeter or two, but when they do the VAR, it's sort of like, it's a similar discussion about ABS now in Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Is a little bit of imprecision just fine, as long as it's sort of, equally applied imprecision. Like I think of, American football. And it's often said that a referee could call holding on just about any passing play, but there's also this judgment of, well, did it really give any sort of advantage or impact on the play? Or, so there's that question of like the precise letter of the law versus the spirit of it, and fitting with the flow of everything. Like we wouldn't want NFL games interrupted for a replay review after every play. Was that holding or not? Like at some point, just play the game.
No, and to be fair, I think the NFL's layered on so many rules that it's the rule complexity that's the challenge there, where that's the risk of soccer as well. I think in general it's relatively simple, but as you add on layered rules, it gets messier to referee. But whether it's the strike zone or it's offside, you still down to how much leeway. And if you're going to use technology to, and they, to be fair, they only count it. They even only look at it when it does matter. So that's the clear, it resulted in a goal, then we'll look at it. And if it didn't, we're not going to look at it. But fundamentally, if you don't want some really bad calls to be allowed, then you're going to use technology. And again, just like the strike zone, you can say, well, allow a 2 centimeter buffer. Well, then 2 + 1 or 2.1 is then a ball, right? And so, at some point you have precision on either side of a line. You might as well just make it the line. Or get rid of all the technology and just say humans, try to train referees and umpires better, and say it is what it is, and it's part of the game. And I wouldn't mind that. I'm just saying, the number of complaints we used to have pre-technology were epic. I mean, should England have a World Cup? Because a goal was allowed that shouldn't. But
was that Maradona, the hand of God goal?
No, that's another one. That's an Argentina one, and they were the better team. This was England's World Cup in '66, where they scored against Germany. But so yeah, you either say, hey, let's not complain about referees make bad calls, or let's allow the technology to do its thing. And I don't know if there's a right answer, but it's kind of can't have it both ways, right?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, back to baseball for a second. Like my mental model, and I played baseball as a kid, so I think I understand the process of the game. I never played soccer, so I don't understand the process from having been on the inside. But I used to pitch. I used to catch in Little League. I umpired Little League baseball. And like to me, like the strike zone is supposed to be the width of the plate. And I think my mental model, and even in recent years when they put the box on screen, like my mental model, I've got a baseball, I'm going to hold it up, is that the middle of, like, to me, my mental model was the middle of the ball. If it's over the plate, it's a strike. But now you see the ABS, and like the technical implication is that if the smidge corner of the ball grazes the corner of the zone, it's called a strike. So I'm like, oh, the strike zone is actually the width of the plate plus 2 baseballs.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's not the way I'd always viewed it. And you can't say that's the way umpires ever called it, because umpires notoriously had different strike zones, and some were more consistent than others within their own strike zone.
Right.
But now, we've got this more rigid uniformity. It's a quality measure as opposed to kind of a sense of quality.
Yeah, but I think they implemented the rule pretty well. You get 2 challenges, and
you get to be wrong twice.
Yeah. Sorry, you can be wrong twice if you challenge. My wife always complains about there's certain players who will challenge at a time that is not a good use of a challenge, but
it's a selfish challenge.
It's a selfish challenge. I just want my at bat to go well. But yeah, if an ump's having a bad day, it kind of evens things out, and it's fast, it's quick, it's automatic, it's correct, and in terms of there's no judgment there. It just is what it is. But I think it's a pretty good use. It probably forces the umps to get a little tighter on their own effectiveness, and it doesn't do too much to disrupt the game. So, fair play to them it leads to fewer, charging out and complaining to the umps about, balls and strikes. But we also, I will since we detoured pretty deeply into umping.
You're surprised I wanted to talk about soccer so much, aren't you?
Well, we've talked about football and baseball in there as well, but I would say, in general, referees make far fewer mistakes than players. They are almost never the reason you lost the game. Mm-hmm. I coached and played for a long, long time, and I can think of 2 games only where I really believe the ref is the reason for the result. The rest, they had an influence on it, but if, we could have done more if we lost because of, it wasn't one bad call. It was, a whole bunch of time where we didn't do what we needed to do. So if you compile all the mistakes and errors and opportunities missed, we complain about referees and umpires and their impact on games way too much, because it's really, yes, we can notice their impact, but they make far fewer mistakes than players and coaches do.
Yeah. One final thing, maybe just real quickly, observation of watching matches and then seeing some social media clips. I'm going to make a forced link connection to the idea of minimizing wasted motion and being efficient in your motion. Of players running miles and miles per game, especially in hot, humid, sometimes outdoor conditions. I remember seeing clips of Lionel Messi, and I'm blanking out the guy from Norway who became a sensation.
Holland.
Yes. Of seeing times where they're basically just standing around, milling about, and then boom, like when they need to, then they take off, like a shark waiting to strike. And it's funny, you might say like, oh, that player looks lazy. Like, well, to me that looks really efficient.
Yeah, it's I think that's fair for certain players. In general, a team that puts on more miles is often going to get a benefit from that. Close down space, make more off the ball runs. But it takes a certain, you have to play a certain role within a team and have a certain amount of intelligence to do that. And that's where Messi's walking. Some of it's energy preservation. Some of it is just learning how to find space very quietly and very subtly. And if you're not running, people don't tend to mark you very tightly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a whole bunch of things happen, but you can't have 3 players in the same team do that, right?
Right.
Actually, Rodri from Spain is pretty efficient with his space utilization as well. But it takes a certain role, a certain intelligence, and then but as a team, almost always take the team that puts on more miles. Because that effort makes a huge difference, and effort is a choice. That's the other thing. When the whistle blows, you can't choose to have more talent, but you can choose to work hard. So as a coach, that was always, hey, the other team might be better and we might lose, but we can choose or not choose to put in the effort. And so that would be always the thing that would get me riled up as a coach, was a choice not to put in the effort.
Yeah. So we're called today Lean Soccer Talk instead of Lean Coffee Talk. Hey, I like the mug, by the way. I noticed you got your Lean Coffee Talk mug. We do not have a
We do not, but I think there was the anticipation that not many people really need a mug with Mark and Jamie's face on it.
Yeah. So let's talk coffee a little bit. Maybe we won't spend as much time on the coffee. Today, we talked about having a theme, and I ended up in a different location than I originally thought, which kind of blew up my execution of the theme. And so you're calling this dealer's choice. We are drinking coffee.
We are drinking coffee, and so I'm gonna build on what you're drinking. But yeah, we just made coffee or got coffee and have coffee. So it's dealer's choice. We don't have to talk about coffee process every single time with what we drank, and we still kind of will. But so what are you drinking today?
So I'm drinking cold brew, especially in the summertime. I like cold brew coffee. I quite often make cold brew, and I think some people might not know. I mean, this is iced cold brew, which might sound redundant, but cold brew refers to the process. That it's a 12 to 16 hour process. It's not the heated coffee pot. It's not a heated pour over. You could call it room temperature brew.
Yep.
So
and we can get into all the hows to do that yourself, and maybe sometime we'll both get a cold brew. And I was like, well, I normally have some cold brew. It's often decaf. It's kind of like, well, it's an afternoon drink kind of thing. But while making some cold brew, I make it in a pretty large mason jar, mid-sized mason jar, and dropped it. And so I had
a whole jar of it.
A whole jar, smashed coffee grounds and water everywhere. Tragic. And so now I have no cold brew. So as we were texting, it's like, well, I can't do that. And so I just did a pour over, just a simple pour over in my little carafe here. And with some Nicaraguan coffee beans, I believe. I can't remember for sure now, but I think so. So dealer's choice with my Lean Coffee Talk mug.
Yeah, well, and I can't claim to have made the cold brew this time. This is a purchased, bottled cold brew, La Colombe, pretty good brand available at the grocery store. So sometimes, it's that simplicity, that's ready to drink. When I make the cold brew at home, that's a concentrate that you either, dilute a little bit, or this sounds like an oxymoron, having a hot cold brew, where if you take the cold brew concentrate and add boiling water, well, now that's a hot cup of coffee that is from the cold brew process, and it's less acidic and maybe a different flavor profile. So I do like the cold brew. It bothers my stomach less, for sure.
Yeah, it's a subtler extraction, and it's also, since you brought up efficiency in soccer, it's less efficient because it takes more coffee grounds per ounce of output. So, I will sometimes get a cold brew, but I tend to make it. So
When you think of the make, I haven't run the numbers, the make buy cost decision, buying it might not be terribly inefficient. I'd have to go through and calculate like a price per glass
Yeah,
at the
well, it's they aren't saying this cold brew is from. We've talked about specialty farms, right? This cold brew is from this Nicaraguan farm, and they're using more mediocre beans because there's
probably.
less
Yeah.
extraction, and so per dollar, it's probably buying it is pretty good. And then when you make it at home, you're probably using better beans for it. So
Yeah.
and more expensive beans.
Yeah. But we do have in our first shifting into lean, there is kind of a connection, an article. I monitor and get updates when the Toyota Times, which is the company publication, puts out articles, and it's often about the car business. It's often about the Toyota production system. There was one that really caught my eye, especially for this, because it was an article about Toyota applying the Kaizen methodology to help local coffee farmers in a village in Thailand, which kind of goes to show Kaizen can apply to everything, kind of focused on quality and productivity and quality of life for the farmers. So a great application of Kaizen.
Yeah, and they have a good chunk of their supply chain in Thailand, and have been plugged in the community there. I know when they had massive floods shortly after the tsunami and earthquake that wrecked Japan, it took out more of their supply chain. So it's great. They do tend to work in their communities, and they've done that for quite a while to try to bring what they do, and they've done that here in the United States with food kitchens and other things.
Right.
So yeah, the thing is, local coffee farmers, they are often very strapped, very thin margins, very very dependent on the weather, to be certain, and yeah, a little Kaizen could go a long way. They don't have a lot of chances to go out and do benchmarking studies and learn from each other, and it's kind of a field where there's not a lot of competitive advantages to performing a little better. It's kind of a rising tide lifts all boats. So I think finding ways to improve yields non-chemically, but finding ways to improve yields and outputs and labor and all that at the farm level is a great use of Kaizen. But the real problem is going to be trying to figure out how to spread practices, because you can't go work with every farm, right?
Sure. Yeah, and there were a lot of elements of what Toyota was involved in, a mix of some technology. So they talked about designing, and I imagine this was a Toyota investment in a irrigation system to help circulate water, to alleviate drought conditions. Looking at standardized work when you talk about improving yield. I've been on a coffee farm once in Hawaii, and I think they're typically hand picked. I don't know if that's only the fact. I think that's pretty standard, but it's a Toyota. You think the farmers would be teaching Toyota about this part, but it said that they taught farmers to, I think, kind of pick and choose, harvesting only the mature coffee cherries, as they're called, instead of clearing everything and then sorting the good from the bad. So I think that will probably affect quality and reducing waste. And then, the other thing I think that stood out was, kind of Toyota talking to the farmers again about a long-term mindset of focusing on quality, and any good quality story has data. Like their quantitative quality tasting scores went up over a period of years of that partnership, and it said allowed them to label it a specialty coffee. They probably get a higher price.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, that's absolutely true. Yeah, and so I think that is again, that's the output measure was more about the quality. And yeah, if you can, I mean, the amount that they raise the quality scores is a significant chunk, right? 76 to 85. And you kind of go, okay, that's a 10-point bump. But, I'm kind of wondering, like, what's the floor on coffee? Because it's not, 5, right? It's a weird, like it's a score system, but it kind of cuts off at a pretty high number, I would think. I actually haven't looked this up. At what cupping score do you actually just not even just discard the beans, just throw them away? So percentages in terms of what's the available range to you, it's actually a huge improvement. And yeah, that's the thing, is that if you can improve the price per pound you get, there's nothing you can probably do in the yields to get as much improvement as improving the actual quality of the beans you're shipping.
I did a quick search. It says that the scores typically go from 60 to 100.
Yeah.
So they started off in what was called commercial grade at 76. So not at the lowest end of that range, but they were able to bump it to 82, which put them in the 80 plus specialty range. And they were now at 85.5, which is getting into what they call high grade specialty. And then 90 plus are like competition winning coffees.
Yeah. So if you consider, 60 to 100 the range, that's like a 25, they basically closed 25% of the available window in 6 years, right? And that's the other thing I think that's important here, is this was not a short term thing. This took a while.
Yeah. Well, and I think I see a clarification here. The score range technically can go from 0 to 100, but I think it wouldn't be sellable below 60.
Right.
I think that's why 60 plus is where they start calling it commercial grade.
Right. Below that, you're just grinding it up for something. But so yeah, to me, the available range is 60 to 100 in terms of actually selling your beans. And if you're making something lower than that, then you're probably out of business very quick. So a lot of hard work, a lot of study, a lot of years, a lot of harvests. And that's, an important thing of, and limited capital, right? They did apply capital, and they probably needed Toyota's help with that. But, a PDSA mentality, experimentation, improvements, incremental, all added up to a massive output gain over a period of 6 years. So, don't, any one of those improvements might have not seemed that big a deal, except maybe the automated irrigation system, but it all added up over a long period of time to a pretty big net gain.
Yeah, I mean the irrigation might have been just the necessary to stay in business improvement, and then the incremental quality gains are key. So we'll link to the article in the show notes. There's a lot of photos, and then the other thing, and this is really what caught my eye intentionally, because the headline on the piece says "Coffee on a Slide: Toyota's Kaizen brings more smiles to Thai farmers and cafes." And there's a GIF of a manual conveyor, you want to call it, of reducing wasted steps, of delivering the drink from the barista to the customer pickup point using kind of like this rail system, and like the cup is set down in this little carrier. And probably the real technology here is how to stop it without spilling the coffee when it comes to the end and hits a bumper.
Right. Yeah, that would be that. I'm sure whatever experiments they did there had had a few failure modes there. And you and I have talked in a previous episode about, how much is the exchange with a barista, a little bit of chit chat, part of the value proposition. This obviously takes that away, but in a limited basis, you would also kind of wonder, well, okay, this is fun. I want to experience it. So, I would say I probably, if you lay out your counter right, you have a lot of the final coffee prep where the customers pick it up, and it's not not very much transportation needed. But
Well, so I look at this and to play devil's advocate, they've automated the waste
yeah,
as
exactly.
opposed to changing the layout of the coffee bar. And maybe the layout was just inherently terrible given the space.
And Toyota has for a long time known that conveyance is waste, right? So
Mhm.
it's and automating it is automating waste. So I think either this was a gimmick or the right answer wasn't available. Um, and or it's just an experiment. Like, let's see how this goes and see if
Yeah,
people like it and see if
yeah,
it's fun. And
yeah.
I have to say, if a local coffee shop had a whole bunch of automation, short of pulling the shot, I would go just to experience it. But then I may hate it. Right? That's the part of the experiment, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a time and a place. Like I'll make a sushi comparison where like, okay, the best sushi product and experience is when you're sitting at the counter and the chef is making one piece at a time and handing it to you and you eat it and you have some interaction maybe. There's also a time when I enjoy going to a conveyor belt sushi place
Yeah.
where there's no interaction. You just grab a plate or you put in a special order and a fun little vehicle comes around the upper track. And like, yeah, that's just it's different. It's all sushi, but it's different experiences.
Yep. Yep. And so yeah, I'll look for that in the U.S. When it comes here, if it comes here, but it probably won't come to your local shop. It'll probably be a chain. Cares a little less about the smile, and with labor challenges, struggles to get people that want to smile, right? So,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that's part of it. If you hire people because you need the labor to make the coffee, and you just can't hire people that want to smile for the customers, yeah, maybe I remove that problem by not even having the interaction.
Yeah,
So we'll see. But
yeah,
a fun Kaizen application.
yeah.
Uh, but I would be curious what the evaluation metric was for it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, so that's a transition point to the next stories we're going to talk about related to um, labor shortages and automation. There were two stories, one from South Korea and Hyundai, one from closer to home in Michigan and General Motors. But first, the Wall Street Journal had an article about Hyundai and where some workers went on a partial strike and they were protesting humanoid robots being brought into the workplace. So Boston Dynamics, a famous developer of like I think like the robot dogs, I think
yeah,
is Boston Dynamics, right?
right.
Owns Boston Dynamics, which was news to me. But they unveiled what they call Atlas, a 6'2" humanoid robot. Now they were bringing this in as co-working or co-bots, saying it's not to replace workers, but the union and the workers are, of course, maybe not believing that and went on strike. So they're making some demands. They want some protections. They want to be put on salary. They want job security guarantees when it comes to AI and robotics. But the company stance is, we want these humanoid robots to address what they call the 3Ds, jobs that are dirty, dangerous, or dull. And to me, that sounds like what I understand Toyota's philosophy on automation to be. Like if it's a matter of safety or if quality is better, to use robotics or automation, but not to do it to wholesale get rid of people.
Right. Yeah, and it's in a lot of cases you will need a lot of technicians to monitor, to manage, to repair, um, maintain these devices if they're going to do that much work, right? And yes, I don't know if it's been the 3Ds, but fundamentally we would look at unhealthy, naturally unsafe, or difficult to manage quality types of jobs and look for chances to apply automation. That's been true for a long time, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Long time. and so taking robots as humanity to do some of the same things is very fair. And also fair is, well, the cat's out of the bag, right? It's here. Somebody's going to make them. It's I wrote an article recently on AI fragility, and it's not pro AI, it's not anti AI, it's thoughtful AI, and so I think the same thing applies here. How do you be thoughtful around it? And understanding people's concerns and addressing those, right? So change management includes managing risks, managing perceived risks, and that includes, okay, where does this go? I think communication is part of the equation there, but not enough. Because we'll make promises and then we can break them. So that's not enough, and that's why, boy, that's where unions come from. Is you guys break promises, we'll put them in a contract and make sure you can't break promises. So there are some concerns there. I'm not sure going to salary, is what makes the most sense there, but yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. This is just a form of automation. It's just not attached to other things, right? It's isolated from, it's not bolted to the ground automation. It's just another form of automation. It's just a little easier to program and a little more independent, and also has its own limitations, but it's here. And so just like any automation that was already here, where does it make sense?
Yeah, and there's, I think, this idea that, these humanoid robots or cobots would be working shoulder to shoulder with humans. And then, you have to think about OSHA or other requirements. Typically, robots are inside a cage, for safety reasons. And so I did a little bit of reading here. Like there's it's not a strict rule that all robots in the US anyway must be inside a cage.
Right.
But there are certain situations where it still is required when it says here, sharp or dangerous payloads, high payload or speed. Like there's some need for risk assessment.
Yep.
And that's going to change along with the technology, maybe.
I think the amount of sort of axes to, kind of how big is the window, right? So you could kind of say every conveyor is automation, robotics at some level, right? Start, stops, and, it's just one dimensional. So, but, if you have a KUKA welding robot and an auto body plant, it can move in a big envelope, and it's heavy, and a lot of other things go with that. You have a lockout tagout that it's behind. So, if a robot turns the wrong way and doesn't see the human that's standing there, it doesn't matter if the human was there, human was where they were supposed to be or not. If a robot turns into a human and knocks them over, hurts them in some way,
right,
you're going to have, more and more regulations around it. So, could they be separated? Is there a window in which they can interface, right? So a lot of machine tools that have robotic loading arms inside the machine tool then have a little window where a human can pick things up and put things in. And there's light curtains to make sure that when my arm is in, the robot's arm is not, right? And then the robot can operate freely in the rest of the space. So are we going to have to think about the environment? And to Hyundai's, I don't want to say credit, but are they being a little more aggressive here in order to learn, for Boston Dynamics' sake, how this can work? Is this part advertisement, part pointy edge of the research, the application research window for what they're trying to do?
Yeah, and Hyundai, and this is very recent news. I mean, Hyundai had an 80% stake in Boston Dynamics going back to 2021, but it was just here in July 2026 where they acquired the final stake. So, they have labor shortages in South Korea, aging workforce. They do plan on bringing these robots to their plants in the U.S., which are non-union, including, it says, in Georgia. But
For now.
the Atlas robot, it said costs $130,000. They plan on producing up to 30,000 a year by 2028 and deploying tens of thousands across their own operations. So, yeah, there might be a market for selling these robots to other companies, but Hyundai, they have an interesting decision here of, do they think this is some competitive advantage, or do they want to sell as many robots, even if that means to other automakers?
Right. Yeah, it's and it could very well be both. And this is where the labor challenges are very real. You have, at least in the U.S., we'll talk about that. We have declining population when it comes to people entering the workforce, combined with immigration limitations. You have fewer people to do factory jobs. While we're also building new factories, right? And so, is this ultimately a chance to elevate manufacturing in expensive labor environments, where if we do it right? I'll use this example. I remember we replaced 40 low-paying jobs in a factory with 10 higher-paying jobs to manage the technology, right? They were technicians, they were trained, they got probably 50% more pay than the low-skilled, no-skill jobs. And so do we produce more because we have robotics plus automation, raise wages for the people doing that? But that's a tough needle to thread, and on the way there, you have problems, right?
Yeah.
We're going to see that, but it's not a new problem, right? It's just, I think it's combined with AI and the fact that a robot looks like a human, it probably has a slightly more visceral impact, but automation replacing humans and unions worried about that, nothing new.
Right. I mean, Toyota's original products were weaving looms, and some of those looms became increasingly automated. So there's a long history going back to Industrial Revolution days even. But there's the question then, so it's inevitable to try to compare these robots to what Tesla and Elon Musk are developing, and I'm skeptical because, how much vaporware versus reality is there coming out of Tesla and their Optimus humanoid robots that they're developing. I don't know if Elon doesn't seem to be big into engaging everybody into Kaizen. I've never heard that being part of the Tesla culture. But I wonder if Elon would claim, okay, with XAI, at what point will a robot be able to participate in Kaizen? That's always been the one knock on automation, is that, hey, automation can only do what it's programmed to do. It's not thinking. It can't identify waste. And what is that coming, or is that still AI vision more than reality?
Yeah, I think AI will certainly help you diagnose. Probably will always struggle with some of the creativity, but we have a lot of skilled trades opportunities in the U.S., from welding to tool makers, and as robotics techs, another opportunity for high-paying jobs. That's considered a skilled trade instead of just a low skill job, right? So, how do you optimize it? How do you limit it? How do you improve it? How do you repair it? How do you put them into place? How do you install it to manage new product launches, right? New product comes online, the robot's going to have a hard time just figuring out what's going on there. So, yeah, you'll see, and I think the biggest problem in the human side, layoffs are nothing new. They're often about fundamental economics, which is both cost structure and revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And then you combine that with public companies not always wanting to, I don't want to say tell the truth, because it's not, it's how do we tell a story that Wall Street and investors support, right? And, hey, we overhired. We don't want to tell that story. We were incompetent once, and now we're incompetent twice, laying people off because we overhired.
Yeah.
And we didn't manage it. Or do we want to tell a story, we're investing in automation, and so we're going to do a layoff as support of that? The shareholders are happier, but the employees hear something different. So how many of these layoffs are truly because of AI or robotics?
Yeah.
Hard to know the economics, but very rarely is the company line the full story.
So that's maybe a transition to the GM situation. The headline says quite directly here in this one article, GM lays off over 1,000 workers at Detroit plant, adds 50 robots. Okay, so both of those things are true, but the cause and effect isn't as straightforward. So even UAW criticized the timing, and back to just, boy, it's a bad look. The layoffs, the 1,000 layoffs at the Factory Zero plant in Detroit, that's because of lower demand for EVs. The reduction in the elimination of the federal tax incentive, GM not being alone, maybe in overestimating the adoption of EVs. So in a situation where they do a very GM thing of laying people off, while they're also doing what's a historically GM thing of wanting to replace workers with automation. I mean, this was the Roger Smith vision in the 80s of the lights out factory, and my time at GM was one that kind of illustrated that the company would be happy to not have workers as opposed to partnering with them and engaging them. And some of that was, union history, and I won't recap all of that. But, I think what was going on here was two things. Like, we're laying off 1,000 workers because the EV market's not where we thought it was. Oh, and by the way, we bought 50 cobots from Fanuc to come in. And so just bad timing, bad look. Right.
Yeah, and you actually, in this particular case, did one hand even know what the other hand was doing? And, is somebody sitting there going, "Are you kidding me? You couldn't wait like 3 months?" Because it is a bad look, and it's an inflammatory headline for certain. But yeah, and it's also not entirely true. It's very unlikely, given how long they were developing these. Very unlikely one number had anything to do with the other.
And if production needs, demand is down and production is down, cancel the order of the robots. why make something more efficient if you're not building as many right now? But, Sean Fain, UAW president, kind of, big, painting it in big terms here. We're in a fight for humanity. And, the one thing I would agree with, and I think it's a Toyota philosophy, is using AI to enhance jobs rather than displacing workers. And our mutual friends at KaiNexus are absolutely taking this approach. Greg Jacobson, co-founder and CEO, talks within the company, and he's written publicly about this on LinkedIn. KaiNexus isn't looking to reduce the workforce because of AI. We want to use AI to do things that free up people to do more interesting work and eliminate the routine. And we don't have jobs that are dirty or dangerous, but we might have jobs that are dull at
Mm-hmm.
times.
Yep.
And you may be able to scale better because of AI, but it's about being more effective. So what we're looking to use at KaiNexus, AI for quality and efficiency, and using it to support people and
Mm-hmm.
instead of replacing them. We're not trying to be a company where it's the two co-founders, Greg and Matt, and nobody else. That's a philosophy that's important of using these technologies to support and enable people instead of replacing them.
Yep. And this is, I mean, I agree with Sean. We are in a fight for humanity, but the fight isn't about trying to put the genie back in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
On AI or robotics. Again, robotics have been around at some level for a very long time.
Yeah.
And just because it's not bolted to the floor and it kind of looks like a human doesn't fundamentally change. This is just the next step in a constant battle of automation. So are we being smart in how we develop it, deploy it? And are we doing the right things for humans along the way in training, in engagement, and in not looking at wholesale replacement? So I agree with Sean. I don't think stopping robotics is going to be the solution here, but making sure it is safe. Making sure it's deployed in smart ways, and making sure that humans end up on the right side of things in that equation. And change is messy. There's no chance of getting all this right. That's just not going to happen. So we have to acknowledge that and not pretend bad things won't happen. And not pretend that also good things can't be the outcome.
Yeah. So talking about doing things well, let's shift and talk about another automaker, Ford. So there's a headline here from thestreet.com. Jim Farley uses CEO. Jim Farley uses Japanese management tool to beat $5 billion quality issues. So Ford had, a record number of recalls recently. And the article kind of summarizes, it's about going. I think it's an oversimplification, but going to the Gemba. Like, well, going to the Gemba in and of itself isn't going to fix quality, but they're talking about the quality culture and these different articles about what was happening here. Farley was a former Toyota guy, and he's quoted in the article as saying, I watched in his 40 years in the business, I watched Ford fall in love and fall out of love with quality like 4 times. So this is going back as long as the Dr. Deming era, when he was influential with Ford's CEO at the time.
Right.
William, was that Peterson?
I think it was Peterson. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So, this is going back to like when you and I were kids, the ads were about, quality is job one. And it's interesting to see Farley's, kind of observation there and trying to figure out like, okay, well, can they have a lasting quality culture at Ford?
Yeah. And I think, if you go look at Ford's own story, right, they laid off hundreds or thousands of people in internal combustion engines. They hired hundreds of people, and they had so many quality problems. It almost seemed like a circus there, right? And honestly, I think their quality got so bad and they had so many big problems that they could have just waited it out and some of it would get better. Like it was that bad, right? So it's kind of when everything's going wrong, you just, hey, let's just stop screwing up so much. Things will get better. To be fair, their floor was so bad that, how much better are they? I'm not sure they deserve so much credit for all those gains, because they were finding new ways to screw up. But in all that chaos, they were more focused on things other than quality. And I think that, as it always does, was somewhat around manufacturing, even more so about product design, right? They were trying to shift their product design. They were trying to introduce technology. They were trying to be innovative, and just doing things that work. That you design things that work for the manufacturing floor was 15th on the list, right?
Yeah.
And so, and we've, they mentioned, they talk about JD Power in this article. I had helped build JD Power's consulting business. I kind of partnered with them to they had the data, and all their clients wanted them to consult and not just share the data. And the beginning of their consulting was, let's just help you understand the data and put in a check for the things you're failing at the end of the line. So then we built 4 loops of quality consulting practice at JD Power to go into plants and do assessments. But even then, it was very clear, here's what supports, 1/3 of your problems, but 2/3 come from the design.
Yeah.
And none of the companies wanted that, really wanted that consulting. So, because it was a different group. But, to get quality right for a complicated product, it begins with design, it begins with architecture, it continues into launch and how you launch a vehicle, and then continues with how you operate on the floor. And it's culture, it's tools, it's processes.
Yeah. All of that as a system.
Yeah.
What the back when we were in what was then called the Leaders for Manufacturing program at MIT, now Leaders for Global Operations, Big M manufacturing included the manufacturing enterprise, not just the shop floor. And so JD Power for a minute, Ford has been really trumpeting for the 2026 JD Power initial quality study that they ranked #1. And they had been in 15th place as recently as 2023. But you and I know, and car drivers know, initial quality is only one dimension. What about the long-term reliability? Like, we had a friend over the other day who, said she's driving a Toyota Prius that's on 250,000 miles, and one of her previous Toyotas, she drove it for 400 Highlanders. She drove it for 400,000 miles. She drives a lot for her work. Anyway, and then stories like that are not outliers for Toyota.
No, and I liken, this will be a little bit of a stretch of analogy, but not a whole lot. I think I liken initial quality to the broken windows theory of crime. And here's what I mean by that, right? So for those that don't know the broken windows theory, this was
which I think has been debunked, by the way, but go ahead.
to a degree, yeah. But the idea is you stop small crimes, and you develop an atmosphere of crime prevention at the front lines, and that helps prevent larger crimes.
I think the idea was if there seems like permissiveness about minor crime, then people take liberties and commit larger crimes, right?
Yeah, and there's is that the only thing that affects crime? Of course not, right? So there's some validity to the underlying concept, but which is actually goes back to prohibition, right? With the idea that because everybody drank, the rest of the laws seem less relevant, but breaking those laws. But anyway, the point is that if a lot of initial quality is small errors, right? Small problems, and sort of the permissiveness and sloppiness and okayness, acceptance level of those small quality problems that show up in initial quality leads to we can't stop that stuff, so why even work on the bigger stuff?
Yeah.
And so I believe, getting the small stuff right can help contribute to a culture that gets you working on the whole thing. So is it the best indicator? No.
Mm-hmm.
Is it an indicator that maybe they're getting the culture right? I think so. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I would say getting initial quality at that level of a leap so much better is an indicator that they're getting some of the culture right. And I think with quality more than other cases, right? You can't use quality to overcome bad processes all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think with quality, there's a lot of processes that you have to apply with the right intent, right? So FMEA, right? Failure mode effect analysis um, is a key tool in finding possible problems with your product design and your process design and preventing them. But it can very easily be pencil whipped and filed away, right? So what's the behavior in which you go through that exercise? Is it, yeah, we did the FMEA, check, or is it we did the FMEA and now we're very actively working on the things that could be a problem, right? And so a lot of quality processes don't work if they aren't coupled with the right behaviors.
Yeah. Well, so then on behaviors and quality culture, there were other headlines here about Farley's description of quality culture differences around the world in Ford. So, I mean, I can remember back to the 90s when I was an intern at Ford, various, kind of like, one Ford initiatives under different labels. This is going back to like Jacques Nasser of like, trying to be, one company, and the culture varies. And, that's true at Toyota, plant to plant. The culture is not exactly, or the adherence to Toyota, principles varies over time, as different people will tell you. But a couple things stood out in the one article here. When you think about the broader system, there's a quote here: "In a move that reeks of executive finger pointing, Farley is shifting the blame to the subpar quality culture at Ford's domestic manufacturing plants rather than looking inward at its engineering departments and rushed development cycles." And so Farley's quoted as saying, "Consistently, our China and Mexico plants are the most compliant with process and have the deepest problem solving skill. We're going to have different cultural norms, and even with a great quality operating system, cultural norms are headwinds or tailwinds, depending on where you are on delivering the quality operating system." So he's almost, I mean, it sounds like he's talking about like national culture, which I don't know if that's a different scapegoating. Like he's really saying, well, by the implication is, shame on American workers.
Yeah,
That's large.
I don't think he's saying that. My opinion.
Yeah.
I think he's saying our American plants aren't as well run, which points to management, right? Um, and I think that's, if you have the same product. So first, I believe he's not ignoring product design. I find that hard to, hard to extract from this particular set of statements. But if you have the same design at two different factories producing different levels of quality, you kind of go, okay, what's the variable? And it's that factory, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the two factories. And if you then look at, okay, my quality is much better for the same products at my Mexico factories and my Chinese factories than my American factories. They are not, I can say, the first company to draw that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of that is, some of these factories are newer and they have better tools. They put more into training because they have newer employees. So there's a lot of contributing factors, but fundamentally, you kind of go, well, if our American factories are lagging our Chinese and Mexican factories in quality, then those factories need to improve. But I would say my bet is he's probably pushing on management as the lever to go make that happen.
Yeah.
More so than it involves the workers, right? And it engages the workers, but because he also said, with this this other quote that you found, which was, what I found is that we were on the wrong side of the invisible line for the dignity of workplace. How could we expect our American workers to beat the Japanese and South Korean imported workers, so to speak, in quality if they didn't have the proper tools or even felt pride in post-coronavirus to share their workspace?
Yeah, I did like that. Yes.
Yeah. So to me, he's saying, it's not the workers' fault. We have not given them good reasons. Yeah. I think he's probably saying, maybe all their behaviors are not world class, but shame on us for putting them in an environment where that's not, where that's okay, right? And so the environment, the tools, is it clean? Is it bright? How do we support them with management? How do we surround the workers with an ecosystem where they should want to take pride in their work? And we can all say, everybody should want to take pride in their work. Why would people not want to? That seems sad to me, but let's make it easier, right? Let's make it easier to put pride in your work, because we put pride into the entire ecosystem, including, is this is the floor cleaner than my kitchen floor, right? Down to those little variables.
Yeah, and I've been rooting for Jim Farley, and rooting for Ford. I think being hired in as an outsider gives you an opportunity to be more of a transformational change agent. Yeah. Look at Larry Culp at GE and what's now GE Aerospace. When you come in as an outsider, you're not personally it stings differently to try to criticize the culture, because if you were a lifer at Ford, you were part of building that culture, as opposed to coming in from the outside. And you have to be careful, because sometimes people don't like to hear it from the outsider, but you can speak a little bit more truth without saying, look, it is what it is. Let's make things better. To come in and not dump on everyone who's been there before, and say we need to change the way we manage. The one article went into the details about going to the Gemba, and Farley was comparing to his time at Toyota. He said it was a common expectation at Toyota to spend time at the plant. Very senior people going to the line, as he put it, quote, find problems, go to the operator who's dealing with the problem, and then try to problem solve to help the team. Like the one thing I always question, though, about the go to Gemba model is, like, is it really you, the executive smart guy, that's going to find the problem? Or are you going to listen to the employees who know the problem and be, as Farley described it, being a servant leader when you have to be? If there's a problem that they can't solve at the front line, like, to me, that's the role of the leader, not to go be the problem finder, but to be, the servant leader, problem solver, and encourage and support people who can support problem solving locally.
Yeah. But some problems can't be seen, as we like to say, solve the problem at the point of activity. Some problems are structural. Some problems are systems and management systems. And so there's problem solving that should be happening at every level. And fundamentally, seeing some of the systemic problems, that's part of the role of management. Are they fixing those? And some of them might be hearing the voices of the employees as a pattern and extracting from that pattern the fundamental problem statement that puts those data points together, right? Yeah. Lots of data points from individual conversations that comes up to a singular problem statement. But you need problem solving at every level. As I read about in People Solve Problems, you have to create the right architecture of systems for problem solving, but you also have to solve problems at your level, right? What is the system telling you Don't go solve your team's problems for them. Solve your solve your own, right? That you learn about from the lower levels. So, I'm rooting for Ford too.
Mhm.
I haven't owned a Ford since the 1980s. That was an absolute turd. I'm probably not buying another one.
Yeah.
Not just because of that. It's just not my style. But I think it's an American icon, and we want them to
Yeah.
do a good job.
Yeah. And these things take time. Farley's been there for, I don't know exactly how many years now, but their chief operating officer made some comments in the earnings call. That said the majority of the recalls are a lagging indicator, I would say. He
Yeah.
said, it's tied to vehicles engineered several years ago before we made all the robust process changes across our industrial system.
Yep. And I've been there because when we were turning around Chrysler, we were building brand new concepts, cab forward design, and the first profitable small car Detroit ever made in the neon, and
Mm-hmm.
the minivan, and all these very different designs, but and transforming our factories, but people still thought of K car quality.
Yeah.
And we had to convince them to look differently, right? So reputation can lag reality.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Design improvements take a while to take place, which is one reason people focus on the factories, is because it can have a faster turn,
Right.
you turn around. But if you never get around to fixing the front end, you'll be chasing your tail forever.
Yeah. So, I've talked before, you and I have talked a lot, and I've talked in different podcasts about, when I worked at a GM engine plant in the mid 90s. And I was there were a lot of manufacturing execution quality problems, to be sure. Like this GM North Star engine, as it was called, was the premium V8 engine, high tech, great design. I had a chance recently to talk to somebody who's a friend of my dad who worked at that same plant in kind of the decade before I got there, and he was telling me how the quality history of that plant, the quality reputation was terrible because previous generation engines had some inherent design flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And so it hurt the plant's execution, where you could be building a poorly designed product properly and still have huge problems. So there was a previous V8 engine built in the 80s where there were some design flaws around some technical details about the threading depth, and they were combining aluminum with iron for the first time, and there were some poor choices of where the bolts just didn't hold over time, and there were some other issues where camshafts would just get worn down to smooth cylinders. And so or almost, but when the cams are getting rounded off and smoothed down, they're not going to activate the lifters, and then the engine's just not going to perform properly. And so that was an interesting perspective, because I hadn't heard some of that history of where when I came in, we were 1995, they were still trying to recover from even the internal reputation of this is not a plant that builds quality product.
Yep.
And then I think they fixed some of the design issues, and then we had execution problems.
And this is where going to the Gemba is really important, because it's one thing to have an actual design flaw, right? And that flaw, we execute it properly and it goes into the customer's hands. That's very clear. Still hard, but it's still very clear. The trickier spot is where how you design it. If it's manufactured right, it's good, but it's hard to manufacture right.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember one time sitting in a meeting and hearing the design engineer. They're complaining to the design engineer or the resident product engineer. And they're like, yeah, if you pick up this panel and you just twist it just a little, it sort of pops and then it won't go on properly. And he's like, well, just don't do that. Right. It's like,
Yeah.
you do this thing 500 times a day. It's so fragile to get right, so lacking robustness in its design that asking manufacturing to do it right 500 times a day is impossible, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like, well, it's a manufacturing flaw because they worked it when they picked it up, or is it a product design flaw because they made it hard to manufacture? And
Yeah.
that's always that's always where the finger pointing starts to come in the most. And that's why we talk about the difference between capable and in control and robust when we talk about process design, and why going to the Gemba for engineers is so important to see how their stuff is sometimes hard to manufacture.
Yeah. So there'll be links to a lot of these articles, and
Yep.
encourage people to go and read that and think through that. So a different Gemba, different quality issues. We're going to talk a little bit about Burger King. So one thing before we talk about the article here, the headline is Burger King reveals new, quote, your way champion role to make sure your food is made right. So Burger King's slogan, of course, have it your way, has been a slogan for a long time. Quality, they're trying to do a quality turnaround at Burger King, where I don't know if you've seen these ads, Jamie, where it's in their same executives now at Burger King that used to work at Domino's. Domino's ran the same playbook of ads, the CEO saying, we know our product has been terrible, but we've made it better now. We're sorry. Like, do you remember the Domino's ads were very blunt? Have you seen the Burger King ads about the Whopper?
I think I have. I tend not to pay attention to those, but yeah, I mean, to the point we just talked about, your engine plant and my experience at Chrysler. Sometimes you have to convince people that, yeah, we mean it this time. um, and the only way we can kind of acknowledge, just like your mention of Farley coming in, not having to be tagged with the old problems or the old culture, new leadership, we're going to point at the old problems, say, yeah, we didn't create that. We're here to fix it. We're bad. We hear you. Give us a new shot. Right.
Well, and it's harder to make that risk with a potentially $70,000 vehicle than it is with a now $7 Whopper.
Right.
So, the ads we're talking about, real voice of customer complaints about, the burgers are smashed inside their wrapper. So like, okay, we're going to put them inside a box now with some structure. It's not going to be smashed. And, we're going to put more vegetables on there, and it's going to look better. It's going to taste better. So, my wife would describe us as foodies. She never eats fast food. I occasionally do. Burger King has not been, or McDonald's have not been in my rotation for a while. But we thought, okay, well, let's go try. Let's go see. We had a night. We're like, yeah, we were in a rush. Let's go to Burger King and see if the ads hold up. And we went and we got like kind of sad looking smashed Whoppers. That's not what the ad was promising. Now, like the flame broiled, like it tasted fine, but we did some internet sleuthing, and I think the ads have gotten ahead of the quality rollout. They haven't implemented all of the changes at all of the stores. So, like, okay, we gave Burger King another chance. I don't know if I would give them a third chance. So like, when do you run the ads, whether it's, Ford saying, hey, we fixed our quality, or Burger King saying our Whopper doesn't suck anymore? Like, timing matters for that.
Yeah, it does. I would say two things. One, you're definitely not their target market. And I was, I can't even remember the last time I was at Burger King, and they could have all kinds of ads, and I'm not going to give them another chance. I can't even eat that food now anyway. But
yeah,
but their real target market is people that are going to eat fast food regularly, but they've just soured on Burger King, and so they have a chance to give them more chances. The other thing I'd say is, sometimes it's so hard to even reach your internal employees, right? Oh, we're gonna communicate down. It's like you can send them an email and they're gonna read it, to convince them, hey, it's a new day for all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not saying they're doing this on purpose, but at some level, what's the best way to really, I'll say, motivate and convince Burger King employees that this is a new day? Sometimes leveraging your own commercials that they see on TV is part of that campaign for
Sure.
internal change. Hey,
Sure.
let's raise the bar. We're raising the bar. You're all part of this. Because, I mean, reaching part-time employees in a very distributed network through weak management, not easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're also hitting the starting gun early on the commercials,
Declaring victory too soon. Yeah.
in part to raise the bar for their own teams. I
Could
don't
be.
know.
That could
Maybe
be.
part.
Yeah, but this role is, to me, this role is sort of the idea of inspecting inequality, where this champion, this new role is supposed to focus on, greeting guests. So like, okay, is this like a Walmart greeter type role? Okay. And then double checking orders and making sure customer requests are executed properly. So, one thing Burger King has hung its hat, its crown, if you will, on for a while is have it your way, which means they're more open to inviting customization than I'd say maybe McDonald's had been. And like my favorite fast food burger, I can have it in Texas, is In-N-Out. Like they're all about customization of a very limited, simple menu, and they execute it. I would say flawlessly for what it is. So, they're emphasizing double checking orders and on service recovery. And I'm like, why not fix the kitchen system to prevent the problems from the get-go? I don't know.
But you have a very human process, and this goes back to our conversation about robotics, because you
Yeah,
have a very human process that
for now. Yeah,
is very susceptible to small errors, and is very hard to prevent those errors. You can make it easier to do the right thing. It's hard to make it hard to do the impossible or the wrong thing, or hard to make it impossible to do the wrong thing. So it's so there is going to be errors, right? That's actually inevitable.
yeah. And until the humanoid robots are working back there, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So errors are going to be possible, and double checking orders doesn't necessarily mean, there's two ways to interpret that. Are they Walmart greeters, or are they trying to improve the overall feel and vibe of people coming in and being a good example for the other employees to smile and be polite and welcome people?
Yeah.
Are they double checking every order to make sure it's right? Or are they double checking to improve coaching, to improve training, to improve, to find errors? Is it all the way to Kaizen? No, there's nothing that indicates that. But I think at some level, these were already their jobs, right? But you kind of say, well, were they more focused on staffing and scheduling and, making sure their inventory was right than they were at execution and customers? And so they're responsible as a manager. They are responsible for all those things. They always were. That was true yesterday. So are they just trying to signal, we want you to shift some of that focus in these ways more towards quality and customers?
Yeah.
And, I'm here for that, right? I think it's if they shift the management's focus more on quality and customers and experience and product, probably not a bad thing, right?
Yeah. So we'll see what happens at Burger King. The other thing, just real quick, that was funny is they also in their ads acknowledged, like, yeah, people hated the creepy Burger King mascot with the fixed plasticky head, and they even show that that they laid off the character and he's sitting on the curb with the box, looking sad, like he's been sent out of the office. But
I think it's
they're trying to have some humor with it. But what was that?
Yeah, I think it's fun, and
yeah,
he was creepy, and it's probably not helping your way. But I did want to mention the whole idea of changing someone's title. Even if the job fundamentally wasn't changed that much, right? It's just a focus change and maybe some new responsibilities, or maybe just some more emphasis. Sometimes a title change can imply, it's just an inflection point, right? If you roll out, a new job description, it's hard to get people's attention. But if you change their title, it's like, okay, what comes along with that, right? It makes you curious. It sends a signal that no, we really, really want to do this, and language matters, right? Toyota calls their supervisors group leaders. There's thoughtfulness behind that title, and so even when there's a project that has a title that's gone badly and we need to hit a restart, I will encourage people to come up with a new title for the project to really be clear we are hitting reset. So I think I like the title change. It's hokey for sure, but I think if it gets people's attention and convinces them that no, they have to wake up tomorrow and do their job differently, I'm okay with it.
I think
they
it
have
can.
to back it up with a lot of stuff, right? They got to back it up, but I think language matters, and it can signal, hey, there's an inflection point here. Be an open vessel for the new things we're going to throw at you. And then they have to do it, right? Then they actually have to throw new things at them and support them in that work.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. So, my personal history with these title changes, when I was a GM, they had long changed foreman to supervisor, which was less gender specific, even though it was mostly men, even then at the 1995 timeframe. But then they had the more aspirational title of team coordinators. Well, that was words. But I think, when, Toyota has team leaders, there's more backing that. I've blogged recently, Ford is calling their frontline supervisors process coaches. And there's a lot of complaints on websites like Indeed of people being hired in and saying, yeah, they didn't, it was just a title. It was old school supervisor. I thought I was going to be a coach, and all I did was pass along the verbal beatings. And that's part of hopefully what Farley is helping address in the Gemba management system. So yeah, I mean, words matter, but words alone aren't going to change things.
Exactly. Yep.
So we had another topic. Maybe we punt that to next time about
I think that's fair. Probably several other
jobs in manufacturing. We can talk about that later.
Yep, that sounds good. There's other things that we can tie to that in another episode. So I think that's fair. So
covered a lot today.
Yeah, we covered a lot, which is fun for us. And as always, we want to wrap up with our cultural share. We've done a lot of what we watch, and an awful lot of what we read as well, and a little bit of what we listen to. But do you want to go first?
Yeah, so it's going to bring things back to soccer. I have been a big fan of the show Ted Lasso. And you don't have to be a soccer geek to appreciate that show. Maybe you appreciate it more if you're not a diehard soccer geek. But the trailer for season 4 is available now. So I just watched that yesterday. The long rumored and actually happening season 4. I think it's coming out. I think it's coming out this fall. But yeah, I hope people will go and check that out. What about you, Jamie?
Yeah, yeah, and we've started rewatching Ted Lasso,
Yeah.
and to slowly build up to the new season. And it was actually, on the first World Cup day where there was no matches, and I started twitching a little bit because I didn't have soccer to watch.
Yeah.
That's when we kind of got the ball rolling. So,
Oh, and the release date, by the way, I just Googled it, August 5th. So sooner
oh
than
yeah,
this fall. I'm going to put
so
that
next week. Next week.
Yeah.
Excellent. So mine is I'm going to present it as more of a category, but then I'll give my example of this. So we all know the games that we played, that we, non-video games, board games and card games that we grew up with. And a lot of modern games are still fun. A lot of them are pretty edgy sometimes or get super complicated as well. And there's some creative stuff out there. But my suggestion is go back to before you were born, not the games you grew up with, but the games that existed before you grew
I
up
thought you
with.
meant game. I wasn't playing games in the womb, Jamie.
No, I'm talking about games that existed that people played. There's stuff out there that died and just disappeared as new stuff came online. There's interesting stuff out there. And so my discovery, and it was only because a friend gave this to me, is a game called Flinch.
Well, isn't that fitting?
Yeah.
Mr. jflinch.com. Yeah.
I don't know how my friend, came across this, but he came across this on like eBay. He bought it.
Yeah.
He actually had to assemble the instructions from other stuff, but it's a fun card game. It's unique. It's different. It's not like any other game. So my family's played it a handful of times, and so maybe not this specific game, but point is that none of us knew this game existed, in the 70s because it had already disappeared. But yeah, there's some interesting, fun games that probably you can find on eBay that have long been forgotten. Go back to them, find them, discover them, play them. It's fun.
That's very cool to see, and maybe we'll get together. Next time you and I are in person, bring the game along. We'll find some people. And how many people do you need to play the game? You need
actually, I think it's 2 to 8. I think is it on the box? That's now a standard thing now.
Right. How many people and age recommendation?
It was not back then, so yeah, I'd have to read the instructions again. But we played it with 4 to 6, but I think actually 2 to 8 might be the numbers. So
okay, cool. Thanks for sharing that. And then maybe next episode, we'll chat a little bit about the new season of Ted Lasso and whatever leadership lessons start to come out.
Sure. We'll see.
All right. Well, hey, as always, thanks for doing this. I'm going to hold up my favorite mistake coffee mug, which has water in it.
And my lean coffee talk mug with yours just has your face on it. Mine has yours and my face on it. So
cartoon
faces.
So thanks for listening to Lean Coffee Talk. Check out My Favorite Mistake. Check out Jamie's podcast, People Solve Problems, and the book of that same title. So as always, it's been fun. Thanks for doing this. And everyone, thanks for listening or thanks for watching.
Be safe, be well.